I found 12 countries where you can literally buy permanent residency. Now, it's not citizenship. That takes years of physical presence, language exams, civics tests, and in many cases, a complete reorganization of your life. But permanent residency is different. You put money into the economy, and the country gives you the legal right to be there. Banking, healthcare, family inclusion, all on your terms without moving there full time. And you can get it this year. We're covering 12 countries today, ranked by cost, speed, and how little you actually have to be there. Some of them require a capital investment, while others just need proof of passive income. And the presence requirements range from one visit every few years to genuinely zero. And I'll be straight with you about the strings attached, because there are always strings, let's face it. All right, let's get into it. So first up, we've got Tier 1 Immediate PR. So these are programs where you can get permanent residency immediately as soon as your investment or your passive income is processed. And some of them require a capital investment, while others just want proof of a stable income. But either way, there's no temporary phase and no waiting period. You qualify, you apply, and you get the residency card. So the first country on our list is Brazil. Now, Brazil is a country that a lot of people don't think about for permanent residency by investment, but that might be a mistake. It runs one of the most flexible investment-based permanent residency programs in the Western Hemisphere. And it's not a golden visa in the flashy European sense, but it delivers something a lot more practical, which is immediate and unconditional permanent residency from day one. So what's the investment? Well, we've got two main routes to choose from here. The first one is the business investment route. Now, this one calls for a minimum of approximately 100,000 US dollars at current exchange rates, and that should be invested in a new or existing Brazilian company. And if your investment is in a technology or innovation sector with a business plan that's approved by the government, then that threshold drops to approximately 30,000 US dollars, which is very low. And this is the lowest entry point on the program, but it does come with a requirement, and that is that your investment must either create a minimum of 10 local jobs or demonstrate significant economic benefit for Brazil. Now, the second route is real estate, which calls for approximately 200,000 US dollars in Brazilian property. And this is the more passive hands-off option. Basically, you buy the property, hold it, and you're done. So what do you actually get with this program? Well, immediate permanent residency for you, your spouse, and dependent children. You can live, work, start businesses, access public healthcare and banking in Brazil. And you can also get on the pathway to Brazilian citizenship if that's something you want in the future. After 4 years of holding your permanent residency, with minimal physical presence required, you can actually apply for a Brazilian passport. And Brazil does allow dual citizenship, so you can keep your US, British, or whatever passport you have, assuming that your current country allows dual citizenship as well. So what's the catch here? Well, the main one is that you do need to spend at least 30 days a year in Brazil in order to maintain this residency status. And you mustn't leave Brazil completely for more than 2 consecutive years without returning, or you risk your permanent residency status being automatically cancelled. And of course, as you may have heard, Brazil does have some real inequality and safety concerns that do vary significantly by city. And keep in mind that the legal system moves slowly. So you should be prepared to budget for a good immigration lawyer and factor in the bureaucracy. So Brazil is pretty hard to beat on cost, but if citizenship speed is also on your radar alongside permanent residency, then the next country takes that to a different level entirely. So next up, we're looking at Paraguay, which is the budget specialist on this list. And I want to be upfront about what that means. It could be the right choice for you if cost is your primary driver and lifestyle is secondary. If you're comparing programs purely on price and speed, then Paraguay is going to be hard to beat. So the fastest route to get in is through what they call SUACE, which is the government's unified business registration system. You need to make a 70,000 US dollar commitment to a Paraguayan business, which delivers permanent residency and bypasses the standard 2-year temporary residency phrase altogether. And that US 70,000 does not need to be paid up front. You can actually commit to investing it over 10 years alongside a credible business plan, which is as little as, I think, 7,000 US dollars per year. You can purchase shares in an existing company, or you can capitalize your own company. Personal real estate, unfortunately, doesn't qualify, but if you hold property through a company, then it does. And you'll also need to create at least 5 local jobs. SUACE approval takes around 10 to 15 days, And full permanent residency permit typically comes through in 45 to 90 days, depending on your documentation. You do need to be physically present in Paraguay to apply. There isn't a remote option at the moment. But once you have the PR, the bar to keep it is remarkably low. You only need to visit Paraguay once every 3 years. There's no annual stay requirement, no 183-day rule, and no tax residency triggered unless you choose to do so. And important to note is that Paraguay operates a pure territorial tax system, and it doesn't participate in the common reporting standard, which means that foreign income won't be taxed locally and your financial accounts will not be automatically reported to other countries. If this is important to you, then I recommend speaking to a qualified tax advisor who can explain what that means for your specific situation. And for those interested in going further, Paraguay's 3-year citizenship timeline is one of the fastest in Latin America, and its passport covers around 146 countries visa-free, including the UK, the EU countries, and Japan, and dual citizenship is permitted. So getting to that point, if you do want citizenship, requires genuine physical presence and demonstrated integration, but the option does exist if you want it, or you can just stick with permanent residency. So the catch is that Paraguay is not really a polished expat destination. Healthcare is below the standard of most other countries on this list, and international transport connections are quite limited. So Paraguay makes sense as a legal status play, but it's a little harder to sell as a place to actually build a life. But the good news is that with permanent residency, you don't actually need to live there. You just keep it in your back pocket as a plan B. But what if you don't want to invest at all in any business? Well, the next program on the list doesn't need any of that. All it wants is proof that money already comes to you every month. Panama's Pensionado program has been operating since 1987 and has a well-earned reputation as one of the most accessible retirement visas in the world. So it's technically designed for retirees, but despite the name, you don't need to be retired and there's actually no minimum age. You just need to have a qualifying lifetime income. So what are the income requirements? Well, you do need to demonstrate a guaranteed lifetime income of at least $1,000 per month from a qualifying source. And this can include government social security, a military pension, a foreign company pension, or a private annuity. And for each dependent that you want to include, you should add $250 per month to that baseline. And Panama also offers a property variant. So if you purchase real estate in Panama worth at least $100,000, your monthly income threshold drops to just $750 per month. So what do you get in return for this? Well, most importantly, you get immediate permanent residency. You receive your cedula and you become a legal permanent resident from the moment of approval. And what's more, you're entitled to substantial packages of retiree discounts, such as 50% off entertainment, money off airline tickets, restaurants and hotels, and discounts on doctor's bills and private medical services. I've never heard of this in any other country. You can also open bank accounts, own property, and bring your immediate family with you. In terms of physical presence, this is one of Panama's biggest selling points. So, to maintain your permanent residency status, you just need to visit Panama at least once every 2 years, which is genuinely minimal. And if citizenship is a goal for you, after 5 years of legal permanent residency, you can apply for that, but you will need to have some basic Spanish and get through a test on Panamanian history and culture. And the country does allow dual citizenship in most cases. In terms of processing time for the permanent residency, you do need to file your application through a licensed immigration attorney in the country. And this is not optional, it's actually a legal requirement. Processing does take a few months, typically between 3 to 6. And a few things worth knowing, and take these as a caveat section. So Panama City is more expensive than its reputation suggests, especially when it comes to housing. And banking can be frustrating in practice, with some residents reporting that account opening is slower and more bureaucratic than they expected, even though they're legally entitled to have one. Private healthcare, it's quite good in the capital, but it does drop off sharply outside it. And of course, the attorney requirement is not optional, so you will need to budget for that and factor in the processing times, which can stretch beyond 6 months depending on workload. So Panama works beautifully if you already have that lifetime guaranteed income coming in. But what if you're younger or your income doesn't fit a typical pension structure and you're looking for the lowest possible capital requirement to get that permanent residency done and move on with your life? Country number 4 on our list is the Philippines. And if you're an American watching this, and if you're thinking about an affordable plan B, then the Philippines deserves some serious attention. It's English speaking, it's got one of the lowest costs of living in Southeast Asia, and it offers one of the cheapest deposit thresholds to get immediate permanent residency anywhere on this list. The program is called the Special Resident Retirees Visa, and despite the name, you don't actually need to be retired and you don't need to live there. So as of September 2025, the age requirement was lowered from 50 to 40, which significantly expanded the appeal of the program. So the routes depend on your age and whether you have a qualifying pension. If you're 50 or older with a qualifying pension of at least $800 per month or $1,000 for a couple, then the required deposit is just $15,000. That's the lowest entry point for immediate permanent residency on this entire list by a significant margin. If you don't have a pension, then the deposit rises to $30,000. For ages 40 to 49, it's US $25,000 with a qualifying pension or $50,000 without one. And this deposit is not a donation or a fee, but instead it sits in an accredited Philippine bank in your name. It's your money, and you get it back in full when you eventually leave the program. But the trade-off here is that it's tied up for as long as you hold the visa. And after a period of time, you can convert it to a property investment or a long-term lease if you prefer. And there's a 1-month window for doing this, which is widely cited by practitioners, but you would need to confirm that with a government source directly because I couldn't find it anywhere on the official website. So what do you actually get for this? Well, first of all, you get indefinite residency with multiple entry privileges. The status doesn't expire, although you do need to pay an annual membership fee of $360 to maintain your status, and you have to renew your physical ID card every so often. You can live in the Philippines as much or as little as you like. You can open bank accounts, access healthcare, and bring your spouse and dependent children under 21. If you have foreign pensions and annuities, if they're remitted to the Philippines, then they're tax-free in the Philippines. In terms of physical presence to maintain residency, there's no minimum stay requirement. So you don't have to live in the Philippines at all to keep your status. The only obligation you have is to keep that deposit in the bank and pay the annual fee, which makes it a genuinely low-maintenance permanent residency option. It's a legal foothold that you can use as much or as little as you like. In terms of processing, it's typically 6 to 10 weeks from start to finish. And you do have to be physically present in the Philippines to apply. So you just go in on a standard tourist visa, submit your application, and wait. So the honest caveats here, well, the deposit is capital that's tied up. It should earn some interest, but you won't be able to spend it while you're in the program if you want to maintain it. And in the long run, if you ever wanted to get citizenship in the Philippines, keep in mind that it does not recognize dual citizenship. But for this video, citizenship is really beside the point because we're looking at permanent residency options, which are fast to get, which have low barriers to entry, no ongoing presence obligations, and this is genuinely one of the most affordable in the world. So the programs that we've looked at so far have all been outside of Europe. But what comes up next is a different category entirely, and it's lifetime residency inside the EU. So country number 5 is Malta, and this is a full EU member state and part of the Schengen zone. It has one of the most robust and legally well-established permanent residency by investment programs in the EU, and it's called the Malta Permanent Residence Program, or MPRP. And this is one of the few remaining EU pathways to immediate lifetime permanent residency through a financial contribution. Now, you might have heard of Malta's famous citizenship by investment program. Well, what happened to that? In April 2025, the European Court of Justice actually ruled that Malta's citizenship by investment scheme wasn't compatible with EU law because it granted passports in exchange for financial contributions and it without requiring a genuine connection to the country. So Malta had to go along with this, and as of July 2025, the citizenship by investment in Malta is over. That program has been replaced by a merit-based naturalization pathway for individuals who make exceptional contributions to Malta or to humanity. But this is not a standard pathway for most people. So if you want EU residency in Malta, this is the route to look at. You'd have to get citizenship the old-fashioned way, standard naturalization after many years of residence. Technically, it's 5, but it's minister's discretion, so it can take many more. So let's take a look at these requirements. Well, this program has 3 mandatory components. First off is the property component. So you must either purchase a residential property that's worth at least 375,000 euros anywhere in Malta, or rent a qualifying property at a minimum of 14,000 euros per year. And you must maintain both of these commitments for at least 5 years. But you can rent out the purchased property when you're not in Malta. And after 5 years, the renter can also sublet with the consent of the landlord. The second factor is fees. The administrative fee for the main applicant is 60,000 euros, paid in 2 stages, 15,000 euros on application submission and 45,000 after the letter of approval in principle is issued. Third, government contribution. As of July 2025, the contribution has been unified at 37,000 euros, regardless of whether you purchase or rent. In addition, you need to make a charitable donation of 2,000 euros to a registered Maltese NGO. There are also financial self-sufficiency requirements. You have to demonstrate assets worth at least the equivalent of 500,000 euros, with at least 150,000 euros of that being in liquid financial assets. And these must be maintained for the first 5 years. So this is quite a high financial threshold, but what do you actually get in return? Well, you get lifetime permanent residency in an EU member state with full Schengen access. That's 90 days in any 180-day period across all of the Schengen countries. You don't have employment rights in Malta itself, but you can hold shares in companies and receive dividends. And you can include your spouse, your unmarried and financially dependent children up to age 29, and your dependent parents and grandparents. There's no minimum stay requirement in Malta to maintain the residency under this program. The permit is for life, but cards are renewed every 5 years, and you do need to maintain your qualifying property and financial resources. The standard permit takes 6 to 12 months for processing, and one of the 2025 changes brought in a temporary residence permit option, which you can get in the meantime by paying the initial 15,000 euro installment and providing biometrics. So in return for this, you can get a 1-year temporary residency permit while your main application is processed, which lets you begin setting up a Maltese base before getting full approval. As I already mentioned, this program does not lead to citizenship. Following the ECJ ruling, citizenship through the standard naturalization route does require many years of actual legal residence. So this is a massive change from the situation before July 2025. And anyone researching Malta as a passport route needs to understand that the situation has fundamentally shifted. But it does give you lifetime permanent residency status from the day your application is approved. But the next option is faster to process and cheaper to enter, but there is a trade-off that's important to understand. Like Malta, Cyprus runs an investment-based permanent residency program, often known as the Cyprus Golden Visa, although that's not its official name. The minimum investment here is 300,000 euros in one of 4 qualifying categories: new residential real estate purchased directly from a developer, commercial real estate, which can be either new or resale, shares in a Cyprus registered company with at least 5 local employees, or units in a regulated Cyprus investment fund. For the residential property route, you must pay at least 200,000 euros before submitting the application. And for commercial real estate and the other categories, resale properties are permitted and income can be sourced partly from within Cyprus. And in addition to the investment, applicants need to demonstrate an annual income of at least 50,000 euros from sources outside Cyprus. And this goes up by 15,000 for a spouse and 10,000 for each dependent child. And this requirement is important. It's a critical detail that many people overlook. This program requires both the capital investment and proof of ongoing income. So it's not purely a property purchase program. So what do you get in return? Well, first off, you get lifetime permanent residency for the main applicant, spouse, and dependent children up to 25. You don't have employment rights in Cyprus itself, but you are permitted to receive dividend income and hold unpaid directorships in your invested company. And you do need to maintain the investment to keep the permit. If you sell without replacing it with an equivalent, then your residency could be revoked. In terms of presence requirement, you need to visit Cyprus at least once every 2 years, but there's no minimum annual stay and you don't need to relocate. In terms of processing, the standard timeline is 5 to 6 months, and Cyprus also offers a fast-track route with approval in approximately 2 months. Cyprus is an EU member, but it's not currently part of the Schengen area, which means that a Cyprus permanent residency permit doesn't grant visa-free movement across the Schengen zone. However, it's worth noting that Cyprus has completed all the requirements for accession, and there's a vote expected in 2026, which could bring it into Schengen. But some analysts suggest that 2027 is more realistic. But whenever that happens, PR holders will gain the full Schengen benefit automatically. So that's Tier 1 covered. All of the programs I've just walked you through give you permanent residency from the moment you're approved. Next up, we've got Tier 2, which is for people who don't need PR instantly, but want to get there in months rather than waiting for years. Tier 2 is the fast-track PR. So these programs don't grant immediate PR on the moment you're approved, but they're a lot faster than the standard residency pathways in many countries, typically completing in under a year. So first off, let's look at Uruguay. Now, Uruguay doesn't get enough airtime in the residency conversation. It's arguably South America's most stable democracy with the highest Human Development Index score, and it runs a straightforward residency program for financially independent individuals that doesn't need any investment whatsoever. So what's required for this? Well, first off, you need proof of a stable recurring passive income of at least 1,500 US dollars per month. And this needs to be passive in nature. So that could be dividends, rental income from abroad, pension payments, or annuities. And it must come from outside of Uruguay. Generally speaking, active income from employment, like remote work or freelancing, generally doesn't qualify you for this. So, how does the process work? Well, first off, you apply in person at the National Directorate of Migration in Uruguay. And within approximately 10 days of filing, you will receive your temporary cedula, which allows you to live legally in Uruguay while your application is being processed. And full permanent residency is typically issued within 6 to 12 months of application. To maintain your status, you should avoid being absent from Uruguay for more than 3 consecutive years. And if you do want citizenship in the long run, then you would need to demonstrate genuine physical presence during the qualifying period. The citizenship timeline is quite short. You just need 3 years of permanent residency for married couples and 5 years for single applicants. And you do need to demonstrate integration and conversational Spanish. Uruguay runs a territorial tax system. And as of January 2026, new residents benefit from a 10-year tax holiday with some updated conditions requiring real economic investment in Uruguay. And after that holiday period ends, foreign capital income is taxed at a flat rate of 12%. So Uruguay is the strongest overall package in Tier 2 if you're willing to spend time there. But the next one is for people who want zero presence requirements and the lowest possible entry cost. Next on our list is Georgia, which offers one of the most accessible real estate-based residency programs in the world, with a business-friendly environment, a flat 20% income tax, and zero tax on foreign income for residents. So Georgia's residency by investment program has 2 tiers. First off, the standard real estate route, which requires property with a value of at least 150,000 US dollars. You can combine multiple properties to reach the threshold as long as each one is properly registered and appraised by an accredited body, which gives you a 1-year renewable temporary residence permit. Now, the investor residency route requires 300,000 US dollars in qualifying investments, which can include real estate, business assets, or other approved investments. And this provides a 5-year residency permit, which then converts to permanent residency after 5 years if you still meet the requirements. Now, presence requirements is where Georgia really stands out. There's no minimum physical presence requirement needed to maintain your investment-based permit. You don't have to live there. You don't have to visit there. You just have to maintain the qualifying investment and make sure to renew it each year. So for the fast track to permanent residency, you can reach that eligibility at 5 years. But for the standard route, unconditional permanent residency is available after 6 years of continuous residency, which is defined as not being absent for more than 90 days in any 5-year period. In terms of tax, Georgia operates a territorial tax system. So if you're actually tax resident there, which means you'll be spending over 6 months a year in the country, you end up paying tax only on your Georgian-sourced income, with foreign income being entirely exempt. The flat income tax rate is 20%, with a 5% rate on dividends, interest, and rental income from residential properties. Remember to always speak with a tax advisor if you're considering this option. So what's the catch here? Well, I would say it's the genuine geopolitical risk of Georgia, given its proximity to Russia, along with the volatility of domestic politics, with significant protests happening in the last couple of years over concerns about democratic backsliding. So the legal framework for residency in Georgia is solid, but it's important to understand the wider context before you commit long term. So Georgia keeps costs low at the expense of some geopolitical risk, but if budget is not your constraint and you want the fastest processing with zero obligations, then the next program is in a league of its own. Now, the UAE Golden Visa isn't really permanent residency in the legal sense. What it is a 10-year renewable visa that does not lead to citizenship. But if you're somebody who wants a stable legal status, zero tax, and zero presence requirements, then it functions as PR in most practical areas, and it processes in 1 to 2 weeks. So the investment route that most people use is real estate at a minimum of Emirati dirhams 2 million, which is roughly 550,000 US dollars at current rates. Make sure you check these if you're going for it later down the line. You do need to purchase the property outright, not via a mortgage. for the full amount to count toward your eligibility. There are several alternative routes through qualifying investment funds or business ownership at the same threshold. In return, you get a 10-year renewable permit that covers you, your spouse, and your children, including adult children. You can open local bank accounts, access healthcare and education, and work in the UAE if you want to. Standard UAE residency does lapse if you're absent for more than 180 days, but if you're a PR holder, then you are exempt from this rule. You can live entirely outside the Emirates and your status will be valid indefinitely. So what's the catch here? Well, mostly the cost. $550,000 US is a pretty meaningful commitment, and the real estate market in the Emirates does have opaque segments, so you should always work with a reputable advisor. Also, the Emirates operates under a legal system that is very different from Western norms, so that is important if you plan to spend extended time there. And unlike most of the other programs we've talked about, there's no citizenship pathway. The Emirates sometimes grants nationality at government discretion for exceptional contributions, but it's not available to standard residents, regardless of how long they hold the visa or how long they live there. So in the next section, we're going to look at 3 programs that are for people who want a European foothold, but through a capital investment rather than a contribution, and in some cases, at a significantly lower entry point versus the 2 we've talked about already. The next set of programs deliver the same EU residency and Schengen access as Malta and Cyprus, but with one important difference. Your capital goes into an asset rather than a contribution. There's no non-recoverable fees, no government donations. You're buying property or investing in funds that retain value, and one of them is the cheapest EU Schengen entry point on this whole list. Another only joined Schengen 12 months ago, making it brand new territory for investors. And the third one rewards people who are willing to look beyond the obvious locations with a much lower threshold than the headline figure suggests. First up, the Greek Golden Visa. Now, Greece updated its program in 2024, bringing in a zone-based pricing system for real estate. For most of the country, you're looking at a €400,000 minimum investment, which is regional cities, smaller islands, and rural areas. But the high demand zones, which include Greater Athens, Thessaloniki, Santorini, and any island with a population over 3,100, these now require an investment of €800,000. There's also a lower entry point of €250,000 for properties that are being converted from commercial to residential or for listed buildings being restored. So this permit renews indefinitely as long as you can maintain the investment, and it doesn't have any presence requirements. In practice, you can hold it forever. If you want to convert it to actual Greek citizenship, though, you do need to put in 7 years of actual physical residence in Greece and pass a quite stringent language exam. But what the permit does give you immediately is unlimited time in Greece whenever you want. For the rest of the Schengen area, you'll still be subject to the standard 90-day limit. Something worth noting that was brought in 2024 is that properties you buy under this program can't be listed as short-term rentals. You can only rent it to a long-term tenant. So you should definitely factor that into your investment calculation. Another catch is that if you want to buy in the zones that most people actually want to live in or hold property in, you basically are looking at €800,000. And with a 3 to 6 month processing time, this isn't an especially fast solution. So the next program, also launched in 2024, but it's a much lower entry point and it has a processing time that makes Greece look slow. Now, Hungary launched its guest investor residence permit in July 2024, which means it's one of the newest EU investor residency programs on the market. At €250,000, it's the cheapest EU Schengen entry point on this list, and you get a permit that runs for 10 years, which is much longer than most European equivalents. You make the investment into a fund rather than a direct property purchase. Basically, you're putting money into a regulated real estate fund that's registered with the National Bank of Hungary, and it holds at least 40% of its assets in a Hungarian residential real estate. You hold the certificates for a minimum of 5 years. There's also a second route, which is a €1 million donation to a Hungarian university. But for most investors, understandably, the fund route is the more relevant option. So the process runs in 2 stages. First off, you apply for a guest investor visa, you enter Hungary, you complete your investment within 93 days, and you then apply for the residence permit. Processing takes approximately 21 to 30 days, which is very fast, and the total time from starting to getting your permit is approximately 5 months. There's 0 presence requirement, and you have full access to Schengen. It's renewable for a further 10 years, and after 3 years of actual residence, you can apply for permanent residency. and citizenship is available after 8 years of continuous legal residence. So what's the catch here? Well, Hungary's political direction under Viktor Orban has been controversial, and its relationship with EU institutions has become quite strained because of this. The permit itself looks to be legally sound, but it's really worth understanding the wider context before you decide to anchor yourself there with a residency status. So the final country on our list costs more and it takes longer, but it's the only program in this tier that joined Schengen just 12 months ago, and it's now the most affordable full Schengen option in the whole of the EU. Bulgaria joined the Schengen area in full on the 1st of January 2025, becoming the 29th member of the border-free zone. Like Malta, it delivers actual permanent residency rather than just a renewable permit, but unlike Malta, every euro that you commit goes into an investment that retains its value. There's no non-recoverable contributions and no government donations, and no admin fees swallowing up 6 figures before you've even started. The investment is a minimum of the equivalent of 512,000 euros, and this has to go into approved alternative investment funds, or ETFs, which invest primarily in Bulgarian companies. There is a second route that is more expensive, and this can accelerate citizenship eligibility, but most investors go for the standard route. So it doesn't have any minimum presence requirement, and after 5 years of legal residency, you can go through standard naturalization and become a citizen. Bulgaria also has a 10% flat rate of income tax and a 10% corporate tax rate, which makes it among the lowest in the whole EU. So what's the catch here? Well, one major catch is that Bulgarian immigration law is more complicated than most anything else on this list, and there's a pretty demanding level of bureaucracy as well. So I don't advise you to attempt this without a lawyer who specializes specifically in Bulgarian residency by investment, and keep in mind that processing times run from between 3 to 6 months. All right, so that's all 12 countries. Next up, let's briefly walk through which one is right for you and how to make an intelligent decision. So there we have it, 12 permanent residency or equivalent routes that you can get much more easily than citizenship without arduous requirements like language exams, civics exams, and so on. So just as a reminder, permanent residency typically gives you the rights to live, work in many cases, not all, and access services in a country indefinitely. It doesn't require the same things as citizenship. You don't need to do language exams, civic tests, years of physical presence in many cases. So for most people watching this, if you want a solution quickly, then permanent residency could be a smarter first move versus citizenship. To summarize, if you want the fastest and cheapest entry, you should look at Paraguay or Brazil. If you have a qualifying pension, check out Panama or the Philippines, with the Philippine option being particularly compelling for Americans over 50 because it's just 15,000 US dollars that you have to put down. If you're more interested in Europe and you want Schengen access, then Hungary is a good entry point at just 250,000 euros. We've got Greece from 400,000 and Bulgaria at 512,000, which offers actual permanent residency rather than just a renewable permit. Malta and Cyprus are interesting options if you want lifetime EU residency without needing to live there and without having capital tied up in an asset. And for zero tax and maximum flexibility, with no presence requirement at all, it's worth checking out the UAE, but keep in mind that citizenship is never going to be an option in that country. Programs do change fast, so you should always consult with a qualified immigration lawyer in whichever country you choose, and make sure you check out the current rules before acting on anything in this video. This is not legal advice. If this video was useful, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And thanks so much for watching Digital Emigre. I will see you in the next video.